I have been saying for the past, I would say, half year, so let's say since the summer, that I had a feeling that 2024 as a year in film was, for lack of a better word, I wish I could find a better word. I don't want to say weak. I think I could say less than stellar in terms of the upcoming award season. Only Irvin is here with me. Joel and Jose are not. If I was to be with one person for this particular debate, I would have liked it to be Irvin because he has pushed back on me on this topic in our casual conversations. So, Irvin, before you fight me over me saying, I think this award season seems a little less than stellar, we'll go into our reasoning after. But before you tell me how you disagree, I want you to tell me why I'm wrong because I certainly am open to being wrong because I enjoy awards season. I know you do as well, and I know the other guys do as well. So um, there are many reasons why I could be wrong that I can recognize. But since you have your side over there, go ahead and tell me why am I wrong?
Well, first of all, the only thing I want to just get some clarification is like when you mean like award season has been less stellar, do you mean in terms of quality or do you mean in terms of like how, this awards bodies have been just, nominating or managing everything else? Because there's something that happened recently that had affected significantly, as we all know, the fires in California, how that has
Sure,
affected this
sure,
whole thing to the point that honestly, it feels like there's no momentum, um,
right,
and
right,
as it should be, right in the award season, as it should be, there should not be any momentum. But
sure.
putting that aside, right? If you mean like stellar in terms of quality, we're gonna dive in.
I'm glad that you answered my question with the question because it opens this up a little bit. Look, there are a lot of factors. I mean, a factor that we kind of forgot is that at some point, movies that probably were to be released this year probably couldn't because of the writer's strike almost 2 years ago. That's a factor. Now, I'm going to answer your question. I think it's both. I think it's both. And it's not just the two options that you gave me. There are more options and there are more factors that come in. For example, we've seen at the moment that this is being recorded, we've seen the Golden Globes, and that's kind of like the first major award that was held that gives us a barometer of where things might go. It's not the greatest predictor, but it's a start. And what I saw was that, yes, at least of the movies that I had seen, that's another issue we'll get into. Of the movies that I had seen, I'm okay with the ones that are nominated for Best Picture or nominated in the categories, but it just doesn't feel. I don't even know how because each year is different. I guess last year, 2020, not last year, 2023. 2023 was a very strong year in film. And a lot of people do say, and I don't disagree with the fact that when you have a movie that's a front runner, like in 2023, everybody knew Oppenheimer was going to just take everything. And when you have a front runner, it's boring. And I don't disagree with that. But this year, it's there's no clear front runner. As of this moment, yeah, you could say that the two winners of the Best Picture categories in the Golden Globes, Emilia Perez and The Brutalist, are the current front runners, if you will. But there isn't a clear front runner that you could say that's gonna take it all.
Okay, so here's where I'm gonna say, like, I've been, and this is not the only conversation I had regarding this topic. I think I've been a defender of like this 2024. You mentioned a lot of reasons, a lot of things that had happened that affected, the release of a lot of movies. I think that the majority of the this year, the way that it has been, is like some of the most memorable films had been spread out, since
Right.
early in the year. Then we got a summer that I can admit that was a little bit slow, but also there were like very surprising, amazing films that came out during that summer that that I still have on my list, not maybe on my top five, but I have it on my list. But then we got like the fall, and I will mention this because I know that you will talk about it. I'm living here, I'm residing in Virginia, and I could say that even though in here that I will, I'm super lucky to get the opportunity to go maybe to the Middleburg Film Festival and maybe
Right.
get a few releases a little bit before it goes nationwide and all that. I would say that there had been something very interesting that has happened with some of these production companies that had been distributing these films that had been pushing it. And it's not the first year that it happens, but they have been pushing the majority of these big films. And when I say big, I mean like big award contender films. They have been
Hmm.
pushing them to the month of, now in January, or maybe late in January, or maybe the beginning of February, as I have seen a few. And I'm just going to only mention just a couple. You have the re-release of Sing Sing. You also
Hmm.
have the Brutalist that will be going, nationwide, and maybe that will also be in Puerto Rico as well. You also have the Room Next Door. You also have I'm Still Here, which is the Brazilian film that had getting a lot of awards specifically because of the Fernando Torres performance. You have Hard Truths. Like, these are films that had been on every single critic's mouth for a long time.
Right. And
And some of them, they people have not seen it. So people are
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, okay, is that movie that good? Yes, we got Conclave. Yes, people had the opportunity to see Emilia Perez, and obviously, you know, other films like Wicked. But realistically speaking, like, we have to wait so much that I think it affects the momentum in terms of
Right.
the conversation, because unless you're only paying attention to what those critics are talking about, the majority of the audience that enjoy probably a blockbuster but also can see a good drama, or maybe can go to the movies and be exposed to something that is very artsy, they're not talking about it because
Hmm.
they're not released, they're not right now available. And there are many components, there are many reasons, and we have heard a lot of people talking about it. But I think that that's why it's been a little bit less stellar. I think that this year has been more tangible. Last year, we had probably more movies that were directed by, I would say, like, uh, probably legendary directors, or at least they'll be known as legendary directors in the future. And we have Nolan, we had films from Scorsese, and I think that that's one of the reasons why I think it's, or at least you feel that it's less stellar. And I know that a lot of people share the same sentiment.
Right. And gosh, it's that's another point that you made that I think is worth noting. The release dates. Now, I was kind of ranting and raving in our group chat after the Golden Globes because the aforementioned, best musical or comedy picture and the best motion picture drama winners, Emilia Perez and The Brutalist, respectively. Emilia Perez, now, I haven't seen it. I have it on queue. At some point, I will. That movie, for reasons I won't go into, and we're not going to have much time to go into, has been extremely uh, divided upon. Like the reactions, you always hear the expression mixed reactions. This goes further than mixed reactions. There are people who it's almost like 50-50. A lot of people loved it a lot, and a lot of people disliked it, especially people, especially people of
Demographic,
target
demographic. Yeah.
certain demographics that both tries to favor, and the certain demographic that might be uh, inherently, you know, disliking of it. Again, that's issues for another type of podcast that's not ours. But I'm just saying that's a movie that is very divided in terms of reactions. And The Brutalist, only the director has seen it to make a hyperbolic statement. Now, of course, given all the things that The Brutalist has, the very long ass runtime with the dramatic intermission somewhere in between, and an epic type production, I can understand that. But I'm a person who understands these things because I've been into movies and I've been into awards things for over a decade. And I understand these things, but I don't know why now is when I choose to turn into a casual audience member for this year, because I'm thinking, what is this Emilia Perez and The Brutalist? I haven't had access. Well, Emilia Perez, I don't own a Netflix account, so I
Yeah,
don't have
exactly.
access to it.
You don't have access to it. Yeah.
But The Brutalist, Brady Corbet, I'm sure he did a great job because that guy has been making some work for a while now. He's winning Best Director. I haven't access to The Brutalist. And this is not something that's new to me because I've had people come to me asking, wait, that movie, The Brutalist, that's winning everything. Why haven't we seen it? And is it fair that a movie that is released in January uh, wins awards? And I always tell people the example. That's what happened with Titanic all these years ago, right? That movie was a very late release. And when it came to awards time, it won everything. I think the only movie that beat it at some point, if I'm not mistaken, I you know, you could fact check me on this. I don't have the stat in my hand. I think the only movie that beat it was L.A. Confidential, and I think it was for the Golden Globe. That's the only one I can remember. I will fact check it at some point.
You mean for Best Picture, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think you're right, but also I believe that um, it certainly lost just only a few Oscars, right? And
Sure.
one of those was related to another, hit that was in that year like incredibly popular. It's called As Good as It Gets with
Sure.
Jack Nicholson and Helen
Right.
Hunt and
Right.
Greg Kinnear. So that one because Jack and Helen won the
Yeah.
respective awards,
Yeah.
and it was probably the only mild threat to
Right. Right.
Titanic.
And we're seeing that. And if you look at the last few years, movies that have won Best Picture at the Oscars, to be more specific, they haven't been movies that have been late released. If anything, many of them have been earlier, I would say, released in the first half of the year. Okay, so Oppenheimer was released in the summer, and the year before it was Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was a festival thing, so it was early in the year. And then 2021, that was Coda.
Coda. hmm
Coda.
That's
That
in
was a that
August.
and that was a festival one. So
Uh-huh.
it had been running in people's minds since early that year. And in 2020, it was Nomadland. Nomadland was not a late release; it was a later release. you know,
Hmm.
autumn type window there. And before that, it was Parasite. Parasite was early in the year,
Hmm.
and I could go on and on. So
Yeah.
the trend has been that because there has always been sort of a thing of, well, the later you release it, the chances that it's going to be seen during award season and gain some momentum. But that, to
Hmm.
me, is a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it could be. It definitely can be. And the only thing that I will add, because I don't think that that is, something that it's controversial or anything like that. I think that that is a good point you were going through like in the last 5 years, and I think that that makes a lot of sense. I understand that, the momentum conversation of it and aspect of it. Also, I think that now everybody's using like a very rigid and like almost like a microscope, um, uh, uh, you know, pattern to look at box office numbers and how this
Hmm.
is going to
Hmm.
be worth it or not. And I think that that is playing right now in 2024 and 2025. Like it's playing a big, a huge deal because it's a little bit unpredictable to know which films the audiences are going to just run to theaters to watch, or at least they're going to have a great theater life, in like in the majority of theaters. So for example, like Juror number two, that movie moved very well in like in the
Hmm.
within the 3 weeks that I think that it was exhibited, and it was the word of mouth, but also it was a different option of other films that were like
Hmm.
released around that time. So I'm just saying, like as an observation, right, that it was
Yeah.
something that I believe that it is very common in this time of the year, but at the same time I believe that some of these distributors are holding back because of the Wickeds, the Sonic the Hedgehogs, the Mufasas, that people are, you know, going with their families maybe to watch these films, and then these other ones, unfortunately, had been, obviously flops at the box office, and therefore it hurts the reputation of the movie. And I think that the Brutalist right now is going to run that risk. I have seen the Brutalist, and going over like the Emilia Perez and Brutalist conversation, I don't think that Emilia Perez is necessarily top two right now. This is me. I don't think so. I don't think, and maybe anybody can just debate on this. That's fine. I
Yeah.
think that Emilia Perez and the Brutalist, I'm going to say this, have things that can easily affect the viewer's experience.
Hmm.
And that is because of the expectation. You're sitting down to watch this movie that had been like sweeping awards and all that, and there are things that obviously we don't want to spoil and all that, but there are things that when you have the experience to watch it, you can be turned off by it.
Right.
And that is something that I believe that has affected a lot. And Emilia Perez has been a little bit more like I would say like um exposed, right? The conversation regarding like a lot of things that don't work in it. However, objectively speaking, Emilia Perez has also a lot of things that work
Right.
and work very well. And those who say, objectively speaking, that don't, it's because you are just on the train that you just want to hate because you want to hate,
Yes.
or that you feel, you know, offended by it. And I,
Yes.
and I, and I will say that's okay. But like I mentioned, objectively speaking, why do I say objectively speaking? Because I saw this movie in a festival, and you know, it was presented by Zoe Saldana. So it
No.
was
Right.
there. So there was a
Right.
lot
Right.
of enthusiasm. There was a lot of excitement. And I felt into that, not trap, but I fell into that little hole
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I left the whole festival with so much high on this film because the energy of it and all of it. And it's a movie that if you see in the theater with an audience, I would say that the experience is different and it is almost electric because how stimulating it is. However, now after rewatching it a couple of times, I understand 100% all the criticisms
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all of it. But at the same time, it has
Yeah.
things
It's,
that
it's
really worked. And I'll
yeah.
tell you this without saying much. The Brutalist, it's another film that it has this gargantuan like effect in you while you're watching it because you're watching something that it's very different from any other movie that you have seen. But
Yeah.
at the same
I can
time,
imagine.
but at the same time, it has things that for me, it holds the film to be in that M
Hmm.
word group. And and I understand those who are going to minimize and reduce those things, um, but they're very evident. Those things that I don't want to call them flaws, but
Yeah.
those things that could turn anybody off, I think that are very tangible. And when you leave the theater, you definitely carry those with you. Whether you want to
Right.
end up saying that this is a masterpiece or monumental, whatever it is, that's that's on you. That's the
Right.
fan in
Right.
you. And but they all have the both of these films have undeniable achievements,
Right.
and Brady Corbet deserves, rightfully so, all the awards that he's getting. And I'll tell you this, so Adrian Brody.
I want to go ahead and ask you this to kind of. I feel like we're and when I say we, I think I mean me. I think we're putting maybe a little bit of a negative connotation to 2024. I think 2024 has been solid. I think the fact that 2023 was a fantastic year, you follow it up with what we've had, and it feels less. So I'm going to put a spin on this for a second, and I will ask you this. In your mind, 2024 as a whole, 10 years from now, when somebody asks you, what did you think of 2024 in film in general? What is going to be your takeaway when somebody asks you that?
Um, it was a challenging year, but at the same time, it delivered um, at least three major classics.
Okay.
And I think that we're going to circle back to 2024 as we sometimes do when we look 2015. We look
Right.
at Max Fury Road. We look also at Spotlight. We looked, how big of the conversation of the Revenant was, which I remember that it was really
Right.
controversial as well,
Hmm.
and for many reasons. And I think that it's going to it's gonna it's gonna enjoy that reputation. I think it's going
Okay.
to. I think that its legacy, and this is how um I think how important is to have this, you know, observation.
Hmm.
Uh, Sing Sing became today the only film in history who that will be exhibited at the same time in theaters and in prison, in jails.
Okay. Okay.
So
That's great.
if you don't think that that is great, if you don't think that it's something pretty remarkable, then I don't know what to tell you. And this is
Hmm.
the first time that this happens. And the same goes with films like The Brutalist. I think that it will be revisited, it will be studied, like when years from now. And I think that there's another film, and I think that you watch this, um, and you love it. I think it's number one. It's The Substance. The
Yes.
Substance will age like fine wine, just like, with all due respect, how Demi Moore has aged, because she looks incredible. So I think that this this is I think is going to be the legacy that 2024 uh, will leave, and it has left a mark in me.
Right.
And I will say that I I don't think that it's a lesser year of, like, compared to 2023 at all. At all. I think that the big films, or the remarkable films of 2023, the 2024, will go toe to toe with 2023.
I'll tell you what.
Absolutely.
I'll tell you what. I think a takeaway that I have, some of those smaller films, if you want to call them smaller films, rose up plenty in 2024, and more specifically, uh, daring films by women, female directed,
Yep.
daring type films. We mentioned The Substance, which is basically, leading the way in that sort of subcategory that I've mentioned. Coralie Fajar's The Substance, wonderful work. It is my number one film of the year. It's going to be tough to topple that, but there are so many other films directed by women, and that's going to be my comment on 2024. Years from now, when somebody asks me, "Hey, Chris, 2024, what do you think?" Well, it comes after 2023 with a lot of great deep movies, but 2024 had its mark because it had a lot of daring films directed by women. I mentioned The Substance. I will mention Baby Girl. Um,
Mm,
Night Bitch
absolutely.
from Marielle Heller. It's not furry, but Night Bitch is a crazy ride. A documentary slash fiction type film by Zaya Anger, my first film. Terrific creativity there. Um,
And
my
you
old
also have
ass.
the Last Show Girl with Pamela Anderson, directed by
Right,
Gia Coppola. So I think that
right.
yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm not saying that, Last Show Girl is one of the best films of the year and all that, or
Hmm.
2024, but it is probably one of those smaller
Yeah,
achievements in terms of, working with, as I've heard, like a very tight, short schedule, like 17 days of shooting. And I think
yeah.
that that whole, and the reason why I say this is because I was at the Middleburg Film Festival, and Gia Coppola presented the film, and she
Right.
introduced it, and this is one of the things that they asked her, and I think that is uh pretty outstanding. Like, I think it definitely is admirable. And like you said, I love The Substance. I think, like I mentioned earlier, this movie's going to age very well. People are going to revisit it, and people are going to we can probably see a trend of
Hmm.
what will happen in the next few years, of maybe, young directors, or maybe female, like male, non-binary, will
Right.
probably use it as a good, nice blueprint to make commentary of different things, like the same way that the director did. And I think it's pretty awesome.
And I want to mention a couple more of these titles, because it's just so really good. I Blink Twice, directed by Zoe Kravitz, and
Hmm.
you mentioned female actors, non-binary, you know trans directors made a couple really cool movies that I saw this year, which are I saw the TV Glow.
TV Glow.
That was, yeah, I saw the TV Glow and the People's Joker, and both tackle that topic of trans identity in such a creative way, and those are such daring vision by these filmmakers, and I think that's the mark that it leaves me in 2024. So uh, I didn't say. I hope nobody act me about this. I did not say 2024 was a bad year for movies. I did not. So,
No, it
uh,
wasn't.
you
And there
know,
there are other ones. I'm gonna mention this, Chris, and I know that you might ask, but I'll say this. This year also carried a lot of smaller indie films that created a huge impact, at least in terms of like the experience of, or at least the exposure of smaller like scale films such as Strange Darling, Dee Dee, and
right,
the
right.
one that the one that no one saw, no one has seen, and I kid you not, it is definitely one of the best films of 2024. It's called Ghostlight. And
Okay.
I remember like those films, and they are very small, beautiful,
Hmm.
impactful films, and beautiful in their own way because Strange Darling is, pretty dark, but at the
Yeah,
same way, they have this beauty in its core and in its
yeah.
DNA, and I think that that is another thing that I will remember about 2024 because
Smaller films.
I yes, I was exposed to films that probably not a lot of, you know, average audience or moviegoers have seen, and
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to see, and I really loved it. I was incredibly impacted by those.
Yeah, and and two more that I want to mention along the lines of small films. Uh, I used to be funny. Sometimes I think about dying. Two
Yeah.
very strong character-driven films by led by Rachel Sennott and Daisy Ridley, respectively. Terrific, terrific films. So for I think it was a grand year for smaller, more independent films, and for young, daring, specifically female filmmakers. So that's going to be like my main takeaway for 2024. So uh, let's table this one here for now. Let's do final shots.
Honk! Forget it! How dare you!
So, Irvin, you want to give me two final shots to leave?
Ah, two final shots. Okay, this is what I think. Um, I think that the following ceremonies should be postponed indefinitely. Um, I don't think this is the time to necessarily cheer for movies. I think that they can help us to cope, but I believe that what's happening right now, it's just something that we all should be just paying attention to it. And I'm including the Oscars. As much as I love it, it's going to affect those remarkable films from 2024 because it will not, you know, I don't know how some of them and some of the people behind it will be in a cheerful spirit
No, but
to do it.
I heard that they're going to be moved back. If they haven't, somebody please correct me. But I think all of them are being
Yeah.
moved back. So,
And
and
the good
it's
thing is that some of them have not been like the nominations have not been released yet. So I'm hoping that we are given time
yeah,
to
absolutely,
process that, and I think that it's going to be fine in terms of like the awards. I think
yeah,
it's going to be fine.
yeah.
I would say that um, listen, it is. I think I've mentioned it, and I'll say it again. It is baffling. It's a crime that we can look back that 30 years ago. Michael Mann directed Heat, and that movie did not earn any Oscar nominations. I think it's embarrassing. And I will say that no film, specifically the winner of that year, it's not even close and remotely to that epic
You answered my
film.
question, though. You answered my question. I said every time I think of a movie that I love as much as you love Heat, and it's also well beloved. I always think of the year it came out and the awards sort of thing. And you say it got no Oscar nominations, and then you kind of ask yourself, huh, is it better than the movie that won Best Picture? So I was about to ask you that. That one was Braveheart, right? If I'm not mistaken,
Uh,
Braveheart was the one that won.
in 19, yeah, that is correct.
Okay, so
It was Braveheart.
that's a tough one.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would choose Heat. But that's me.
Yeah, but you know
Okay,
what?
so
And Chris, I'll tell you this. Nobody knows this. Only the people that know me. I adored Braveheart for the most part of my life
right.
until maybe like 6, 7, 8 years ago. So I get it, but still, Heat is that one.
So my two final shots. The first one is this. Female screenwriters write men better than anybody. Just saying.
Oh.
I have many examples that I can give at a later date, but when it comes to men and how men express their feelings, women write them better. Just saying. And my second final shot is please lower the prices on the 4K players for the love of His Holiness Evil. Quick story. I had a 4K Blu-ray player that got a little bit busted and had a remote control that kind of malfunctioned, and I said I need to buy a new one. And the best one I could find and was told is the best one in the market. It set me back $200. And as great as it is, I kind of regret it. But oh well. That's the thing with us movie lovers. That's kind of an essential item, especially for someone with a movie collection as hefty as mine. Okay, so that would be our episode for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and check us out next time, and we are out. Thanks for listening. Find our episodes on Spotify and YouTube. Also, follow our Instagram for FilmSake Pod.